Well, let's get talking now. Fuel subsidy is a form of government intervention to reduce the cost of fuel by providing direct financial support to oil companies and, as such, subsidize the product to consumers. That's Nigerians. Nigeria, one of Africa's largest producers of crude oil, relies heavily on this resource for its economic growth. With the removal of fuel subsidies, stakeholders believe the economy would develop and reduce the rise in public debt. Well, let's talk about this. And joining me to look at this burning economic issue, he is a partner at Commercial and Energy Practice that's at Candelp. That's Mr. Israel Aye. Mr. Aye, thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, let me start with the regular question. Finally, a same subsidy has to go. There is no budgetary allocation for subsidy from the month of June this year, according to the figures that we have. But as a technical person, tell us more about that process. Where are we, and when do we get to that junction? Because at the moment, some stations are selling for above 500 naira per litre.
Well, yes, it's how do I describe it? It's both a simple and a complex situation. The economic arguments are fairly simple and straightforward, and that is that we buy PMS, which is actually the subject of subsidy. When we talk about subsidy, because all the sort of other petroleum products are not subsidized by the state as at this point in time. So the key product that is the subject of subsidy, for reasons that we all understand, would in fact be PMS, that is the premium motor spirit, which is otherwise known as petrol, that we use. So in a nutshell, what it means is that the price at which it is dispensed at the pump is not cost reflective. In other words, it is not the normal economic model where it is cost plus that you sell, for a variety of reasons, chief of which is that it is seen as a socio-economic commodity. The state over the years has participated in fixing the price and remitting what is known as under recoveries to those who bring it in. So that's what it really means. So in order to be able to sustain the sort of current rate of prices that we see, it means that the state has to continue to fund those under recoveries. As at the last count, we had spent almost $10 billion this year alone, and we're talking about where we are in terms of, we're just at the end of May, we spent about $10 billion funding under recoveries, which monies we actually don't have. So in terms of budgetary allocation, what the president has said is that the budgetary allocation for funding under recoveries was made up to June, and for all practical purposes, there is no provision for it.
Now that there is no provision for it, many will say that if subsidy is totally taken out, of course, government will save some funds. But some say there might also be pressure on FX. That's for those private guys that might want to import petroleum products. That might also see the price of PMS at the pumps go higher.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last question. It was a bit faint.
Okay, I'm talking about the FX issue, the impact of this on FX, which we already have a problem with. If the private marketers now start to scramble for FX that is not available, will it not affect the landing cost and eventually the pump price of PMS?
Well, of course. I mean, we spend, unlike the United States of America that can simply produce dollars to make for any shortfalls they have, and I'm not suggesting that that's what they do, but we have to earn dollars in order to be able to spend it. So it is in and of itself expensive. Then if you couple that with the fact that our receipts over the years, and they're quite depressed as at where we are because of also a totally different but not unrelated issue, which is deferments and decreased revenues from crude sales and other from crude sales and even maybe gas sales is not as affected, but essentially from crude sales. If you couple those two, what it really means is that we're earning lower, we're spending higher, and the books are not balancing in very simple terms, if we put it that way. And so to your question whether sourcing expensive FX is going to potentially, well, of course it will. Okay, I mean, if you do the demand and the supply, is that we're earning significantly lower FX than we have even the potential to. Then the number of other things that are competing for the attention of the amount of dollars in our possession, and then a large chunk of it is going to funding on the recoveries. In fact, bringing them in and funding on the recoveries, as the case is, or the case may be, and then it creates a very complex problem for us. And yes, you're right, it can lead to, in fact, a compounding of the issue.
Now, let's talk local refining. That is what the Trade Union Congress, the NLC, have always hinged their argument on, saying they want in-country refining to be able to address some of these challenges. Now, Dangote Refinery, we expect to begin production maybe in another 4 weeks or 6 weeks. The Port Harcourt Refinery, we don't know how far the federal government has done with rehabilitating that. So what is your expectation with some all of these efforts around refining? What impact will he have on total deregulation of the downstream? We have modular refineries too in the east.
You know, the refining, the development of local refinery, and indeed, what appears to have changed the conversation in recent times is the Dangote Refinery, because prior to the Dangote Refinery, the received wisdom was that you couldn't quite deregulate the sector, or sorry, you couldn't quite incentivize the building of refineries until you deregulate the sector, meaning that people can or should be able to sell at cost-reflective prices and recover. But as long as you're fixing prices and you're determining the price at which people would sell, then there would continue to be an issue. And so for a variety of other reasons, and I'm not sure that's the only reason, but that was the one that was largely stated by those we thought had the capacity to get into the refining space and help Nigeria build some capacity. And they said, look, that as long as that sector stayed regulated, then there was no incentive, or in fact, there was no way you could make an economic case to any type of investment committee, any sort of credit committee, or investment committee to justify in that sector. Yeah, so that was the received wisdom over many years, and which was why for the longest time, the only refineries that we had were the government-owned refineries, the 4 of them, which we all know. Unfortunately, everybody knows what the state of play is with respect to those 4 refineries. They've been up and down, and to all intents and purposes, not in the mix when it comes to, supplying our PMS and other petroleum product needs in the country. So clearly, there is a need for us to increase that capacity in that space. But where we find ourselves is a chicken and egg situation. Do we build capacity or expand capacity before we deregulate, or do we deregulate before we expand capacity? Fortunately, the PIA provides a platform for deregulation now, but the issue then is to use policy to implement, to implement deregulation and a market sort of scenario. And which sort of brings me generally even to the issue of whether or not we should be removing a petroleum subsidy. The fact, like the president said, it's gone. Now, whether or not this government will be able to sustain that position over the next few days is left to be seen. What some of us have advocated over time is that there should be a transition program to take us to that place, not phased transition, because the very business of deregulating the space, in my opinion, requires a little bit of project management. There are a few complex issues that we should be sorting out in order not to fall into the trap of mismanaging the social, the social, political aspects of the removal of subsidy.
Now, let me ask this question. We see this news all around that's with the new price templates from the NNPC. Yes, yet to be confirmed by the NNPC because Mr. Gabardine is yet to respond, but it's everywhere. It's a new template. But my question really is not around the template. My question is, are we still going to have price fixing when we open up the market?
Good question. So again, in every responsible, if you will, every responsible government will always regulate the market. So market regulation, price regulation is a legitimate aspect of a free market environment. And that's different from price fixing. And so in the end, what we're talking about essentially is, and which is the point I was making about a transition. If it's a 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, type transition, where you articulate the price modulation formula, and that shows clearly how price is arrived at. And if you take telecoms, for example, telecoms is an open market environment, but it's not a free-for-all situation. In other words, the networks wouldn't just fix whatever price they want. Of course, government is not stepping in any way to fix prices, and that's that's an important difference to emphasize. The difference between price fixing and price regulation, that it is a legitimate and a responsible component of the free and open market to regulate prices, but not necessarily to fix prices. But the mechanism for such regulation needs to be articulated clearly and communicated, made open for people to see, so that the regulators can in fact monitor it. And it should hopefully be done in such a transparent manner that all of us as citizens should be able to monitor it and see those who are gaming the system and those who are not operating within the rules.
Interesting stuff there. Well, let's take it further back to Dangote Refinery, which everyone thinks is a solution to this problem, but I don't think so in its totality. Dangote will have to buy crude, and crude will be sold in dollars. Many say if it's possible for government to subsidize crude prices for him, maybe to reduce the retail price here. But I'm just looking at that aspect. You understand these technicalities more than I do. I'm a journalist. But talk to us about how he will get crude and all of that. And at the end of the day, does it look like it could be cheaper than what we will have at the moment?
Well, so again, Tolu, you say you're a journalist, but as far as I'm concerned, you've pretty much summarized the conundrum and reasonably how complex the situation is. We heard the NNPCL GMD say to us that the gains, if you will, at all, of the Dangote Refinery in terms of the bottom line impact is marginal. It's at best 17 naira, and that wasn't going to take away. And for exactly the reason you said, that crude is going to be sold in dollars, and so he's operating. But don't forget that the loans that were taken to build this, and people forget that very easily, that the loans that were taken to build the refinery were taken in dollars. And so this refinery is going to be trading in dollars. Even if you sold crude to it in naira, it is going to be trading and selling it in dollars until it repays its capital expenditure and returns a little bit of a margin. Because it's a private business. Not only is it a private business, it is located within an export zone. So to all intents and purposes, that refinery exists within a geographical location that is not considered Nigeria. So we will be exporting crude or importing crude from the free trade zone into Nigeria. And the savings, we've been told already, is only with respect to transportation. Now, if you were attempting to apply what I refer to as simple solutions to slightly complex issues, you say, well, why don't you offer them, why don't you offer the refinery crude for free? Why don't you offer the refinery crude for, in Naira? And again, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why? Because if you think about it, that is revenue to the state. And if you're talking about that $10 billion, for example, that is money that is being spent, that is not being spent in healthcare. That is money that is not being spent in infrastructure development. That is money that is not being spent in other areas of need of the economy for development purposes. That's on the one hand. And who is to say that, that situation will not be gained by a number of other people, not necessarily by the Dangote Refinery itself, but already, what do we have? We have a situation where our daily consumption does not even stand up to scrutiny. We've been told that we're consuming somewhere around 60 million barrels a day. But if you compare us to regions and places that are similar to us, that the numbers and the data, the numbers they're carrying would be at least half of what we're carrying. So if you went that way, then you would probably be providing implicit subsidy to persons who are gaming the situation. And with porous borders all around us, you don't want to get into that space at all. The current construct is clear. It's an export-free trade zone. It will buy crude. It will sell refined product at competitive market rate. Take whatever benefit there is in terms of freighting, storage, and the likes of it. But work harder at expanding, refining capacity, and quite frankly, investing that sort of funds saved in building the economy. Because a part of what the conversation we're having is also the people's earning power. Because indeed, if the people's earning power was higher than where we are, then some of this will patter away. Because all across the world, people pay significantly higher sums to buy PMS than we pay here. But which is why I refer to it as a simple and a complex issue. But the issue around us is that over 100 million of our population, as we're told, live in extreme poverty, complex type of poverty, and the likes of it. And even though a small portion of them, not significantly high, are the ones that are that are benefiting in any sense from subsidy, yet the emotional response to the removal of subsidies felt even the most by that segment of the society. And that's what makes it a bit complex.
Finally, Mr. Aye, before I let you go, the talk about the competition that would exist in the market by the time it's fully deregulated, and there will be this price issue where you can go to wherever you feel is fine for you to buy when you can buy less. Some would even travel kilometers because they know they will get less 5 naira or less 10 naira somewhere. When do you see that kind of competition playing into this market as we move on?
Well, so that's a bit of the chicken and egg situation that we talked about. Indeed, if you look at regions in the world that are very saturated in terms of refining capacity, Singapore, the Netherlands, and areas like that. At certain times, particularly in low crude price regimes, they shut in some of their refining capacity in order to be able to stay competitive. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where in low regimes we suffer, in high price regimes we suffer, because we do not have a critical mass of that sort of refining capacity in order to be able to, that's robust enough to be able to survive, as it were, in every price regime. So I would say that the way to approach this is to basically put a transition program in place that deals with the socioeconomic issues and political issues in the near term, set a date for sure, and I prefer a transition rather than a phased approach, because the phased approach hasn't worked over many years. but the transition is necessary only for the sake of managing communication. But there should be a set date where this is going to kick in. And before that, what we have is clarity with respect to the mechanism, price modulation mechanism. We have clarity with respect to the amelioration to the most vulnerable segment of society and the likes of it. And then some sort of assurance that you'll be able to sell, at a cost reflective price, and that you would not be compelled to sell at a fixed price if you do bring that in. And that is where that's the takeoff point. And if that happens, you're able to incentivize, as it were, some investment in that space. And then we'll see how that develops within the next 5 to 10 years, because it will take that sort of time to be able to build and operationalize.
I must thank you so much for your time, as usual. Mr. Israel Aye there is the partner at Commercial and Energy Practice there. Thank you so much. It's always good to have you on the program, particularly when we're discussing energy issues. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.